Welcome back to Between Two FARS. I'm Warnke Miller here with Robert Tepfer and Michael Mark, and we're continuing our discussion on litigation in front of the Armed Services Board of Contract Appeals, the ASBCA. Now, today we're going to dive into a very specific topic, motions for summary judgment. The ASBCA, as we talked about in a previous episode, is very flexible and fluid. However, they do have some very specific requirements if you're filing a motion for summary judgment. So let's turn our attention to what those requirements are and how we can best meet them. Gentlemen, you're going to file a motion for summary judgment. What do you need to be thinking about?
Well, hopefully I thought about it before when I was putting the Rule 4 file together, because I want to be able to support the motion with as many documents as I possibly can. And the rule says, and we've talked about this earlier, and I really like it, the board will look to the rules, Rule 56, for guidance. And that tells you two things, that you might want to look at it as well, but they're not going to be necessarily strict adherence to that rule. And the purpose of the motion for summary judgment is very interesting, because what you're trying to do throughout the entire process is to whittle this case down so that it's manageable at a hearing, with focus on specific issues, which means specific documents and aspects of whatever claim has been made. So what are you trying to do with the motion? You're trying to get it disposed of, the case entirely, if you can, by way of a motion for summary judgment, but at a minimum, reduce down certain issues and have them decided as a matter of law that you win. Now, having said that, I've never had a case where I didn't want to file a motion for summary judgment, even though I lose most all of them, because what it tells you in many instances, the judge will not rule, because the judge will come back and she will say something like, I don't have enough facts in this area to rule on this. Well, guess what I'm going to do next? I'm going to either do interrogatories or I'm going to do deposition, and it's going to be focused right where the judge told me to put it, in those particular factual areas. So it's a kind of a discovery against the judge. So I love a good motion for summary judgment.
Yeah, summary judgment is if the facts are as you said, and assuming that they're true, and even assuming that everything on the appellant side or the appellant side is true, they don't have a case. So it's not a dismissal of the case per se. It's saying, no, we find for the government because the facts are such that the other side doesn't have a case to make out. So that's what a motion for summary judgment does. But in order to do that, you got to have the facts. And where are the facts? The facts are in that Rule 4 file. If you're making allegations and there are facts that are not yet in evidence, and as Bob points out, the judge isn't going to grant your motion. And I think judges are a little reluctant to do that unless the case is pretty clear cut. And sometimes they are, but often they're not. That's why we're litigating. So, but a motion for summary judgment could be decided later. After discovery, the judge will say, okay, I've got the facts now and it's very clear and I'm going to grant the motion, or I'm going to deny it. And then there are those judges who are going to say, well, I'll decide after the hearing. Well, then I don't really need a motion for summary judgment. You're going to have to decide the case anyway.
Well, let's talk a little bit about constructing that motion for summary judgment. You do have to walk the judge through the material facts and the documents that evidence those material facts, don't you? Do you have any pointers for how to do that? Do you have a long rambling narrative, or do you do it concisely? What is your preference?
Well, first of all, remember, if you look at the rule, it says you got to file a brief in support of your motion. So that's where you're going to do it most likely. The motion probably is going to be relatively, I'll call it relatively terse. It won't be real terse. But you've got to lay the case out, and you need to lay it out clearly. Now, do I think a 100-page brief is a good idea? No, I don't. Not unless it's an incredibly complicated case. You want to make things easy for a judge. So to the extent you can be concise and clear, that's the best way to do it, but you also have to be complete, and that's the hard part. So there's a balancing act here, and there's no one answer for that. Bob's done this a lot more than me, and he probably has a lot more insight as to what kinds of things will work and what don't work.
One of the things that I think you got to remember throughout the whole thing is the consistency. You issued a final decision, then you issued an answer. They have to be consistent. They have to address the same facts. And ultimately, the motion is grabbing the documents and whatever documents you obtained in discovery, interrogatories you obtained in discovery, or statements out of depositions to support what you said in the final decision, what you again said in the answer, and then ultimately you're showing to the judge that as a matter of law, you should prevail. And it'd say, you know, nothing says that if you file one, the judge says, you know, I don't have any facts. There's nothing indicating this or that. Okay, you want more? I'll go get it. Then you come back and you can actually refile it and say, you know, it's almost complimenting the judge. You're right. We didn't have enough of this. How about this statement? How about these documents? It supports it, and it should all be very consistent and flow all the way through. And hopefully you get rid of the case, but if you can't, you at least are litigating a smaller case. That's a critical thing that a lot of people, I mean, I've had client organizations say, you've lost 2 out of the 5 aspects of the motion. And you want to talk about the glass being half full, you say, no, there's 2 areas I no longer have to go, and the other 3 I found out what the judge was really looking for. A final thing that I would emphasize is the judge is being educated on this case. When they receive the final decision, they're listening to our response, and when that's consistent, the provisions in the contract and why our logic is consistent with the law. Subsequently, they see the same thing in the answer with regard to why we did what we did with regard to each sentence in the complaint. Then they get the motion, the same thing. It is kind of like a subliminal, but not so subliminal message that you're giving the judge throughout this iterative process that is educating them regarding the facts of your particular case and the law that you saw as responsive.
Excellent. Just recently, I had a contracting officer come to me with a Bob always says. I love it when they do that. And this Bob always says is a good quote to close this episode with. Bob always says, anytime you have an opportunity to file a motion, you should, because it gives you your chance to tell the judge your side of the story.
Exactly.
Keeping that in mind, we'll see you again next time between 2 FARS. Seems to take longer and longer to get the recording started, but that's okay. We at least have learned to wait a little while. The first couple episodes, it was like, yeah, there was nothing to edit off at the beginning. We were already talking when the stuff came online. All right. Clear up, and will be giving us a pretty grainy picture. And I think I started where I'm talking, which means I'm the giant face in this. But that's okay. I will pretty quickly go to the Rule 4 file, and then when we clip back in, when I stop sharing my screen, whoever's talking will be the big head. So I will plan to go pretty quickly to the Rule 4 file while one of you are talking. Okay, we are recording. I think that we've given it enough time, so we'll get started here. And the kids have vacated the area, so maybe I won't have to put myself on mute this time. I had to mute myself through most of the last episode.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. Oops, I think too much of that's in the shot.
I have kind of some editorial opinions on motions for summary judgment. I'm not sure you want them. You know, I really love them.
That's why you're close to retirement here. You can say whatever you want.
There you go. There you go. I love it.